All right. While we wait, those of you who are here, if you have any questions, you can ask. We'll get started, and then as people come in, let them join in with the discussion. So, any questions before we get into today's lecture? Any questions on what has been covered so far?
Sir,
Yes, Ajay.
sir, can you send some problems to solve?
I'm going to do that today. I'm going to do send that, right?
Okay, sir. Okay.
Just like we had the previous tutorial sheet, you're going to get some more problems to solve. All
Okay,
right?
sir. Okay. Sir.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions?
Hello.
Yes, Aditya.
Sir, why does the roughness of a pipe depend on its length? I mean, it should depend only on the material that the pipe is made of, right?
1 second. Slow down. So, what is your question? The question is.
Sir, why does the roughness of a pipe depend on the length? I mean, in the dimensional analysis, you
1
said
second.
that.
Wait. So, okay. So your question is, why does the roughness of the pipe depend on the length?
Yes.
Did I don't know. Did we say that its roughness of the pipe depends on the length of the pipe? Did we say that? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I misspoke. What is your specific
I mean,
concern?
sir, in the dimensional analysis, you wrote that the dimension of roughness would be L.
L meaning length.
Yeah.
Okay, so rough. Okay, so you're going to wait. So your question is about dimensional analysis. So what I was thinking was, while we wait for more people to join in, we can have any questions that pertain to anything before that. We'll get into this anyway. Okay. So hang on, Aditya. Okay, we'll answer that.
Uh,
Anybody else has any questions about the previous lectures or any general questions? Okay, so I'll give you some kind of an update on what the plan for the rest of the classes is. Okay, so right now we are on April 17th. Okay, so the plan is to complete the lectures by let's see, around the latest we'll go is May 10th. Okay, that's what has been uh, see, we are still looking at it. Okay, if we can finish the classes by April 30th, that is good. Otherwise, we may go into the first week of May 10th. I don't think I will go take it as far as May 10th. We'll probably go up to the first week of May. Okay, so maybe by May 5th or 6th we'll finish things off. All right. So that's how we are going to proceed with that. And then for the final exam, it is still not clear exactly what the procedure will be as we wait for more clarity on how things are going to go. Right. So it's a little bit of a challenging situation. All right. Okay. So we have about 13, 12 people in the class. So let's get started. Okay. So as I said, this lecture is going to be towards understanding dimensional analysis and similitude. I mean, some people also call this similarity instead of similitude. It's the same thing. Dimensional analysis and similarity. Some textbooks may have the word similarity. So similitude, similarity, both of those are the same idea. Okay. So you can all see my screen. Anybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Okay, so the motivation for this this entire topic of dimensional analysis is that most of the times when you're dealing with practical situations, most problems may not be very easy to solve using analytical approaches, right? So already even with turbulent flow, you've already seen that we don't have just theory to help us to understand how pressure changes due to turbulence and so on, right? So we don't know how exactly those changes happen. So therefore we have to what we do is typically we resort to either performing experiments or use numerical models to try to help us understand you know, how pressure or velocity or whatever it is varies in practical situations and in most practical situations. Now the question is, so for example, if you think of this very simple illustration, you know, imagine there's a force acting on a body. This body, you can assume that it is immersed in a fluid stream. Okay, so now this could be an aeroplane, or it could be, you know, sediment that is getting transported in a river and so on, right? So all of these, if you think about it, it's a body immersed in a fluid stream, right? So the question is, if I ask this question, the force acting on the body that is immersed in this fluid stream, I'm interested in finding out what this force is, right? So is it possible for us to do some experiment that will allow us to understand this, right? So now let us assume that we know that the forces acting on the body is probably some function of the length of that body, the velocity of the fluid stream, the viscosity of the fluid, and the density of the fluid. Okay, let us say we know these how do I say, we know these connections between the force acting on the body and these different parameters that can define you know, this situation. What are the different things that can define the situation? Number one, the length of the body. So when I say length, this L over here doesn't necessarily mean the width doesn't matter. L means any characteristic length, right? So for example, if the body is a sphere, then this length will be the diameter of that sphere. Okay, or if it's any other shape, then we'll pick one appropriate characteristic length of that body. Okay, so L does not necessarily mean only length, it's a characteristic length. Similarly, V, velocity, it's the velocity of the fluid that is flowing past that body. Okay, so now again, this velocity doesn't mean any particular velocity at a given point. It's a characteristic velocity that defines the flow that is happening. Okay, of course, mu and rho are you know, parameters, properties of the fluid under consideration. So that will, you know, vary according to the situation. If it's air, then it's a different mu, different rho. If it's water or honey or oil or whatever it is, you may have different values of these mu and rho. Now, if this is all that you know about this situation, right, then if I'm interested in trying to understand the role of each of these parameters on this force, okay, suppose I keep everything else constant and only vary L, how does force vary, right? Suppose I keep everything else constant and only vary V, how does the force vary? And so on, right? So I have 4 different parameters. I may be interested in trying to understand, you know, the impact of each of these individual properties. And so for that, you know, to at least be able to draw a nice curve, typically if you want to draw a nice curve, 3 points is enough to probably draw you know, something that resembles a curve. But to get a nice distribution of that curve, typically you will expect to see something around, you know, 10 points on the curve, and then you have some confidence in drawing that curve, right? So if that's 10 points per curve, so you can imagine that there's 4 variables here, right? 4 variables, 10 points each, right? And then times each of those attributes. So you'll have 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. So that's 10,000 experiments, right? So just to find out the impact of changing these different variables, L, V, mu, and rho. Hello, yes, somebody has a question.
So what is the V, sir? Whether it is velocity of body or velocity of fluid stream?
Velocity of the fluid. So now if the body was moving, then you'll have relative velocity, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So V is the velocity. You can think of, if the body itself is moving, then V is the relative velocity of that fluid stream. Or if it's just a stationary body, then it's just the velocity of the stream of the fluid itself. Okay. So all of these different parameters are any other questions? Okay. So this is what it's telling us. So that if I'm interested in trying to understand the role of each of these 4 parameters on my variable of interest F, right, then I will need to do 10,000 different experiments. Okay. And imagine if you had to do 10,000 different experiments, you would need, so for example, if you want to see the role of mu on F, you would have to find 10 different fluids of 10 different viscosities. It's very difficult, right? Expensive. Water, air, it's easy, very easy, you know, it's easily available. But if you want to test your find out the force acting because of honey and milk and so on. So you keep adding different kinds of fluids. You run out of fluids to do the experiment. It becomes very expensive. It's not at all possible to do it, right? So then the question is, so obviously this is too costly and time consuming. Now, if it was possible to, instead of running 10,000 experiments, can I reduce this to a smaller number of experiments is the question. Okay. So for that, if we can identify a group of dimensionless variables, okay, that can simplify this entire procedure, that may help us much more, than running 10,000 experiments, right? So the attempt is to identify a group of dimensionless variables. Okay. So in this particular case, if I were to identify dimensionless variables, let us say, now see, so far I've not given you any proof for this. So let us say that I come up with this dimensionless force F divided by rho V square L square. If you check the dimensions of this, you will notice that it is dimensionless. Similarly, rho V L by mu, this is also dimensionless. You know what this is, right? Rho V D by mu is your Reynolds number. So Reynolds number in general, you can say it is rho V L by mu, because L is any characteristic length. It could be anything. It could be the diameter of the pipe. It could be the diameter of a body, or whatever it is, right? So then what I have done is I have found out a dimensionless force. This is F divided by something which makes this entire left-hand side dimensionless. This dimensionless force is simply a function of this dimensionless number, right? So no matter what rho, V, L and mu I choose, as long as, so for example, if I have, a fluid with a density of 1000 kilograms per meter cube, and the velocity is 3 meters per second, and the length of the body is 10 meters, and the viscosity is 10 power minus 3 or whatever it is, right? Then I pick another fluid which has a different velocity, which has a different density, which has a different viscosity. The length of the body is different, and the velocity of that fluid stream is different. But if in these two situations, if I look at this rho V L by mu, if in these two situations the rho V L by mu is identical, then the force acting on that body, or the dimensionless force acting on that body, will also be identical. Is that clear? I'm not saying that this, whatever these two functions are, F divided by rho V square L square, this is some kind of a dimensionless way of representing force. Okay. And this rho V L by mu is a dimensionless way of representing the impact of density, the impact of velocity, the impact of the length of the body, the impact of viscosity, right? In a dimensionless way, I'm able to represent these terms. So then all I have to do is run 10 experiments with different values of rho V L by mu, right? In one experiment, and of course, if I'm running the experiment, I will not run it with 10 different fluids and 10 different of 10 different viscosity and 10 different densities. I'll pick one fluid. Okay, I will run it with a velocity of 5 meters per second on a body of 10 centimeters long. Like the L could be 10 centimeters long. Then I'll run it with another velocity with another length. Similarly, I will just do some 10 combinations of velocity and length, which will give me 10 different values of Reynolds number. And for each of those situations, I'll come up with a way to measure this dimensionless force, right? And then I'll say, okay, now I can plot this dimensionless force versus this rho V D by mu. This rho V D by mu will be, or rho V L by mu will be on the x-axis. On the y-axis is F by rho V square L square. And that will tell us what the relationship between these two functions is, right? One is dimensionless force and the other is the Reynolds number. Okay. Is this idea clear? That instead of running those 10,000 experiments, now I only have to run 10 experiments with 10 different values of rho V L by mu. Okay. And of course, it should not be that I run it with, I'll run one with a Reynolds number of 2000, another with 2005, another with 2006, not like that. I'll run one with a Reynolds number of 10,000, another with a Reynolds number of 1 lakh, another with a Reynolds number of 10 lakh, and so on, right? So that I can very clearly and remember Reynolds number, typically, you will plot it on a log scale. right? So you need to run a different variety of Reynolds numbers, 2000, 10,000, 100,000, 1 million, 10 million, and so on, right? So all you have to do is really run only 10 experiments, or let us say maybe even 15 experiments, or even 20, 30, 40, 50. Still, it's a small number compared to 10,000 experiments. Is that okay?
Here we cannot get individual relations now, sir. Then
Individual what?
relations between V and L, V and F.
No, we can't. And that's the whole point. That we are, I'm only interested in finding out what the impact of varying all of these variables will be, instead of finding out what the impact of varying V alone, then L alone, then mu alone, then rho alone. It's not possible, right? Because you have to keep everything else constant. Now I'm saying, you know what, it doesn't matter. The impact of changing V or the impact of changing L, you can combine them together and look at one parameter, rho V D by mu or rho V L by mu. And instead of looking at 10 values of V and 10 values of L, you can just run 10 values of rho V L by mu. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. So that is really the motivation of this whole idea of dimensional analysis. Okay, this is actually it's a very, very powerful way of solving real problems. Okay, so that's what we are going to attempt to do. So now the advantages of doing this are many. Okay, number one, the most important advantage is that it reduces the time and effort spent on experiments. Right, that's very obvious, right? So there's no comparison between running 10,000 experiments and 10 experiments. Obviously, the time and effort spent will be much less. Then a second advantage is that sometimes when you don't know what the physical relationship between the different variables is, okay, in this particular case, it's relatively easy, okay, because we are already introduced to the idea of Reynolds number. We already know how important Reynolds number is when it comes to fluid dynamics, okay. But suppose you don't know some parameter, but you don't know what the physical relationship between these variables is. Sometimes it can give you a very, very insight. It can give you very important insights into the physical relationship between all of these different variables. Okay, and then a third thing, which is also very important, is that you can convert this understanding from what you're doing at the lab scale to something that can be at the field scale, right? Which means, for example, let us say you're building an aeroplane. Okay, would you rather build a full size aeroplane and then test whether it can fly, or whether what kind of forces it will experience when it is flying in the atmosphere and so on? You would not want to do that, right? Because number one, the amount of money you will spend on building that aeroplane is so much, and then somebody has to be sitting inside to fly it, so it's too much of a risk, right? Instead, what you do is you build a small aeroplane in the lab, okay, and subject it to conditions that will be similar to what it will experience when it is flying in the atmosphere. Whatever pressure is there, whatever temperature, whatever density of air, whatever. So many things will be variable at that altitude. Most of these flights fly at 10,000 feet, 30,000 feet, and so on, right? So that is what the advantage of this this approach is, and that is something that allows us to get some understanding of how to translate what you're learning from the lab to something that you can implement on the field. All right. Okay. So now we'll not get into too many philosophical discussions about dimensional analysis. We'll just jump into the approach for doing this. And the most popular approach for doing dimensional analysis is what is called the Buckingham pi theorem. Okay. So this theorem is basically a systematic framework which allows you to reduce the number of dimensional variables. See, when I say dimensional variables, in the previous slide you saw f was a function of L, V, mu, rho. All of these have dimensions, right? L has some dimension. L is length. V is velocity, length per time. Mu is viscosity, which is mass per length per time, and so on, right? Whatever other parameters there are, all of those have dimensions. So those are dimensional variables. The objective is to reduce the number of dimensional variables to a smaller number of dimensionless variables, right? So in the previous example that I showed you, we had 4 dimensional variables. We were able to bring it down to one dimensionless variable, which is rho v d by mu or rho v l by mu, right? So that is the advantage of this Buckingham pi theorem. And how it works, the procedure, I'll just explain the procedure. It's pretty abstract, but it's sometimes for some people the abstract procedure makes more sense, whereas for some people only when they do an example it makes more sense to them. So we'll just look at the procedure of the abstract. Okay, so the first step is to count the number of variables in the problem, right? So in the previous problem we had force, length, velocity, viscosity, density, and so on, right? So you'll just count the number of variables and we'll call that small n. Okay, and then we'll list the dimensions of each variable, right? So each of those variables has its own dimensions. Length is simply L itself. Density is ml minus 3. What is it? Velocity was lt minus 1. Viscosity is ml minus 1 t minus 1. The force is mlt minus 2. And theta over here refers to temperature. Okay, in some cases you may have some parameter that is also temperature dependent, right? So so for example, that I think that gas constant or whatever, I think has a per degree Celsius or whatever, right? So you all know, different variables and what the different dimensions that they are dependent on. So theta refers to temperature. Okay, so these are the dimensions of each variable. So in this particular problem, the previous problem that we saw, there were 3 variables. Force had mlt, length is simply L, velocity is lt minus 1, viscosity is dependent on ml and t, and what was the other one? Density. Density was also m and L, right? So together they account for all these 3 dimensions, m, L, and t, right? So once you list down the variables and then list the dimensions of each variable, you count the number of dimensions, right? So in that previous example, as you saw, we got all these 3, m, L, and t were the dimensions that were present in the problem of interest, and then call that number j. Okay, so let us say I get j number of dimensions out of n variables in the problem, right? Then what you do is, out of these n variables that are present, you have to identify j repeating variables, right? J repeating variables are, see, as I said, this is a very abstract idea of explaining this procedure, but just be patient and please listen to it. Okay, so we'll identify j repeating variables. Out of these n variables, we'll identify j. Typically this j necessarily will have to be less than the number of variables in the problem. Okay, it's very unlikely that you have a j greater than n, but in most situations this j will be less than n. Okay, so identify j repeating variables from the n variables. Okay, and then you identify the number of pi terms. Okay, so this Buckingham pi theorem, remember this. So the reason we use the word pi, can anybody guess why we use the word pi here? Or does anybody have a logical answer for that? Anybody?
Sir, we use pi as a product.
Correct. Right. So just like we say sigma for summation, right? You all know that we use, okay, we use sigma. When I say sigma and I write xi, that means summation of x1, x2, x3, x4, and so on. Right? We all know this terminology. Similarly, if I write pi xi, that will mean x1 into x2 into x3 into x4 and so on. Right? So if I have n numbers, then pi xi will simply be the product of all of those terms, and sigma xi will be the sum of all of those terms. Right? So this we are very familiar with. Okay. All right. So that is why we call this the pi term. Okay. So we'll identify the number of pi terms. So that we denoted with the letter small k. Okay. Small k is the number of pi terms in the problem, and that will be given by n minus j. Okay. So these n minus j, so you will have k pi terms, and each of these pi terms will be a pi power product. Okay. Now I'll explain what all these power products and all mean in the coming slides. Okay. So basically you take these repeating variables and raise them to some power, some unknown power that we don't know at this point in time, and then for each pi term, you will come up with one repeating variable, which will be raised to power 1. Okay, so yeah, let's just keep going. Okay, so after I identify the number of pi terms, then I'll form the k pi terms or the k power products using j repeating variables and one non-repeating variable, right? So how many, so if I have j repeating variables, how many non-repeating variables will I have totally? How many variables do I have in total? Small n. Out of this small n, if I have j repeating variables, how many variables will be non-repeating?
N minus j.
Right? Okay. So you have n minus j pi terms, which means k. I have k pi terms. Each pi term will have one non-repeating variable and j repeating variables. Okay. So then I'll get these k pi terms, and then I'll form the final dimensionless function that that we just saw. Okay, like we saw in the previous slide. Okay, so I know that this is a very kind of abstract way of writing the procedure, because but you need to, you know, sometimes writing this abstract procedure can help you when you're trying to solve a problem that that you're not accustomed to, right? When I solve a problem in front of you, then everything is clear, right? But when you have to do it by yourself, sometimes it might be more difficult to you know, apply these uh, uh, procedure without knowing what the procedure is. You can't do it. So it helps to have the procedure written down. Okay, so hopefully you're all making notes, so you can you know, use these notes to you know, solve more problems. All right, so let us go to very quickly go to an example problem. Okay, then we'll apply this Buckingham pi theorem to this particular problem, right? So in turbulent flow, the pressure drop in a pipe is a function of length of the pipe, diameter of the pipe, roughness of the pipe epsilon, density of fluid, viscosity of fluid, and velocity of flow. So the question is to find an appropriate dimensionless relationship. Okay, so let us first write down this entire word statement into a mathematical statement. Okay, so the problem said the pressure drop delta P is a function of length of pipe L, diameter D, roughness epsilon, density rho, viscosity mu, and velocity of flow V. Okay, so let us, now that we've listed down all the variables, remember the first step of the procedure was to count the number of variables. So when I count the number of variables, I have to also include the variable that I'm interested in finding out the relationship for, right? I'm interested in finding out the relationship between delta P and all of these, right? So I'll count delta P also. Delta P is your first variable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So in total, there are 7 variables in this problem. Okay. So if you remember, the next step was to count the number of dimensions in this in these variables, right? So first I'll write down all the dimensions of all of these different variables, right? So I think this is where your question was, right, Aditya? Your question was, why is epsilon dependent on L?
Yes, sir.
Right? So I'm not saying it depends on L. So this L over here is, see, deliberately I use small L over here. This is the length of the pipe. This L is the dimension, right? So how do you, if I were to measure roughness, how would you measure the roughness?
Yeah, that would depend on the dimensions of the pipe also.
Yeah. Okay. So, so let us say I have a plastic pipe. Okay, PVC pipe. Okay, it looks very smooth, right? The inside of that pipe looks very smooth compared to a concrete pipe. If I had a pipe made of concrete versus a pipe made of plastic, even anybody, even lay language, we just, a lay person will say the pipe, the plastic pipe is smooth, the concrete pipe is rough, because just by touching it you can feel that roughness of the concrete pipe, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
what do we mean by roughness? If you zoom in to microscopic level, that's the surface of that pipe is not really smooth, but it has got some up and down undulations, right? It is not a smooth surface, it is actually a rough surface if you zoom in microscopically. Okay, now if I zoom in microscopically, I'll see some ups and downs. What is the size of that up and down? If that up and down is 1 millimeter or 0.1 millimeter or 2 millimeters, whatever it may be, that is what this roughness is, right? So yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that is why I say epsilon has dimensions of length. It doesn't depend on the length of the pipe. It depends. I mean, it is by its very definition, it is the length. It is a length. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. So does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
All right. So now what I've done is I've just listed all these different variables, delta P, small l, which of course, small l, by small l, I mean length of the pipe. Okay. I don't want you to get confused between this L and the dimension L. Okay. So that's why I'm using small l over here. Okay. So L, D, epsilon, rho, mu, V. So for each of these, I'm listing the different dimensions of each of those terms, right? So pressure is ml minus 1, T minus 2, length is L, diameter is L, epsilon is L, and so on, right? So this I have written. So now if you count the number of dimensions, you have M, you have L, and you have T. So all of these three variables, or sorry, these three dimensions are represented in all of these 7 variables, right? Okay. So in this case, number of dimensions J is simply 3, M, L, and T. Okay. So I've got J equal to 3. So now immediately I know how many repeating variables I need. I need J repeating variables, right? So for picking these J repeating variables, I have 7 variables in total, right? Delta P, L, D, epsilon, rho, mu, and V. Out of these 7, I have to pick J number of repeating variables, which means in this case, 3 repeating variables, right? So as I said, if you listen to the lecture, there are 3 rules that you have to follow in identifying these J repeating variables. Okay. Rule number 1, do not pick the original variable that you're interested in. Delta P is the variable that you're interested in finding out the relationship between delta P and all of these different variables. So when you identify these J repeating variables, rule number 1, don't pick this original thing, right? So here in the problem statement, it says the pressure drop is a function of. So whatever term it may be, do not pick this in the repeating variables. Okay, that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, as far as possible, no, not as far as possible, pick the repeating variables such that they cover all the different dimensions in the problem. What are the dimensions that are available in this problem? M, L, and T, right? So you should pick variables, repeating variables, such that they cover all these 3 dimensions, M, L, and T, right? So out of the remaining 6, so rule number 1, you can't pick delta P. So you are left with these 6 variables. Out of these 6, you have to pick 3, right? So naturally, if it has to represent all dimensions, you can't pick L, D, and epsilon as your repeating variables. You can't, right? Because then that will only represent the dimension L. So you will pick one out of these 3 that will represent length. So I'll pick D. Okay, I'll pick diameter. Okay, there's a reason why I picked diameter. I could have picked length, I could have picked epsilon, but for a reason I'm picking D. Okay, and you will understand why we are doing that. Okay, so we will pick D. All right, so I've picked D. Now I need to pick one for mass. Okay, so I can pick either rho or mu, right? I want a term that represents mass. So then I'm at liberty to choose either rho or mu, correct? But this is where the third rule comes in. The third rule is that you will pick the simplest possible variable possible, right? Rho in this case has dimensions of m, l minus 3, whereas mu has m, l minus 1 and t minus 1, right? So m is a more complex variable, whereas rho is a simpler variable. It has only 2 dimensions. Mu has 3 dimensions. So the simpler variable, that is rule number 3, is that you will pick the simpler variable. Okay. So to represent mass, I have picked rho. Now I have the third dimension, time. Again, here I have an option of choosing either mu or v, right? I have the option of choosing either mu or v. And here again, I'll pick the simpler one, which is velocity, which is because it only has length and time, whereas mu has mass, length, and time. Okay, so that is the 3 rules that I'll follow in picking these repeating variables. Rule number 1, don't pick the original variable of interest, delta P in this case. Rule number 2, pick the variable such that they represent all the dimensions that are there in the problem. In this case, it's M, L, and T. So therefore, you can't pick L, D and epsilon together as repeating variables. You can only pick one of them, right? Third rule is that pick the variable that is simpler. If I have the option of picking rho or mu, you should always pick rho because it is a simpler variable. If they have the option of picking between mu and v, you should always pick v because v has the simpler dimensions. Okay, any questions at this point? Any questions? All right, so I'm hoping that there's no questions on this. All right, so I've identified these j repeating variables. So the next thing I'll do is I'll compute my k, right? K is simply n minus j. So what is n? N is 7, j is 3. So I'll have 4 pi terms. N minus j is 4, so k is 4. So I'll have 4 pi terms. Each of these will have 3 repeating variables, d, rho and v, and 1 non-repeating variable, which will be the remaining other terms. Each of them will come in 1 pi term, right? So there are 4 non-repeating variables, delta p, L, epsilon and mu. Each pi term will have one of those, right? Okay, so now I'll go on to forming the pi terms, right? So for the first pi term, pi 1 equal to d power a. So this is the repeating variable d. D power some power a, which I don't know at this point in time, times rho power b, which is also a repeating variable. I don't know what the power of that is. So I'll put rho power b times v, which is the third repeating variable, power c, right? Then as a convention in the first pi term, although you have 4 non-repeating variables to pick from, right? What are the non-repeating variables that are available to you? Delta p, L, epsilon and mu, right? Because d, rho and mu have already, d, rho and v have already been taken. The remaining terms are delta p, L, epsilon and mu. But as a convention in the first pi term, we take the, you know, the original variable of interest, delta p, right? This is the convention that we typically follow, right? So my first pi term is d power a, capital D power a, rho power b, v power c into delta p power 1. Okay, so I'm interested in finding the values of a, b and c such that this product will be a dimensionless term. Okay, so as I said, we are interested in finally finding out pi terms. Each pi term will be a dimensionless variable. Okay, so pi 1 will be, so now I'm writing this entire thing in terms of the dimensions. So the dimension of d is L, so it will be L power a. Dimensions of rho is ml minus 3, so it's ml minus 3 power b. V is lt minus 1 power c times delta p, which is ml minus 1 t minus 2. So this entire thing must be equal to m power 0, L power 0 and t power 0, right? Any questions at this stage? Please, anybody? All right. So now we've just written these different terms with their corresponding powers a, b and c, and of course the pressure term delta p with its 2 power 1, so therefore that's 1, and this must be equal to m power 0, L power 0, t power 0, right? So now the job is very simple. You just separate out the different dimensions and equate their powers to 0, right? So the first thing we'll do is mass. So mass here, there is no contribution from power a. For power b, there is contribution from here, m power b, so that's b plus 1 over here, right? Here also there's no contribution from m, so here I have power 1. So b plus 1 equal to 0, right? Any questions on how I got this? You understand what I did here? I've simply taken the powers of mass and added them all up, and because the product of, right, the product of the powers will be the sum of the powers. So I mean, product of 2 powers, you can write them as, so m power b into m power 1 is m power b plus 1. This all everybody knows. Okay, so that must be equal to m power 0. So therefore b plus 1 must be equal to 0, right? So already we have found out what the value of b is. B must be equal to minus 1. Now let us do the same thing for length. Length will be length power a plus minus 3b plus c plus minus 1 equal to 0, right? So that's a minus 3b plus c minus 1 equal to 0. So we already found out b equal to -1. If you put that in, you will get an expression for a plus c equal to something, right? All right. So two unknowns, one equation, we still can't solve it. So we'll go to the third dimension time. So for the third dimension time, I have minus c minus 2 equal to 0. So c equal to -2, right? So now I can solve this expression and find out what the value of a is, right? Sometimes it's possible that you may get, a, b, c, 3 equations, then you'll have to solve them simultaneously. You know how to solve that. I don't have to tell you how to do that. So that you can very easily solve and find the values of a, b, and c. So in this case, I get a equal to 0, b equal to -1, c equal to -2. Okay. So then I substitute these back into my pi term. What was my pi term? Pi term, pi1 equal to d power a. So that is d power 0. So d has no power over here. So that becomes 1. Rho power b. So b is -1. So b will go to the rho will go to the denominator. And c rho equal to c, -2. So v power c will become v square in the denominator, right? So when I do that, what I get is pi1 equal to delta p divided by rho v square. Okay. Any questions on this? Any questions? All right. No questions. That's good. Okay. Let me just, can anybody just tell me what the time is? I want to make sure I don't go too long.
11:12.
What is that?
Time is 11:12, sir.
11:12. Okay. It's like, what is it? 11 or 12? I got confused. Okay. So it's 11:12. Okay. So we've got the first pi term. Now similar thing we'll do for the second pi term, right? Pi2 equal to, now this is the important thing. You have to keep the repeating variables the same. D power a, rho power b, v power c. That is the same as the previous slide, right? D power a, rho power b, v power c. That's pi1. Pi2 also has the same thing. D power a, rho power b, v power c. Now I'll pick the next non-repeating variable, which is L, length of the pipe, L power 1. This again, I'll just expand it out in terms of the dimensions of each of these different terms. And then so this is very, very easy, right? I mean, I don't want to bore you with this, right? This is fairly obvious. So here you will solve it and you'll get a equal to -1, b equal to 0, c equal to 0. So if you substitute that, you will get pi2 equal to L by d. Now this is something that you could have guessed even without doing this entire thing, right? There is only one possibility in which you can get a dimensionless term when both diameter and L are there, right? And rho and v, there's no way they can cancel out, right? Because one has m and L, the other has L and t, right? So therefore, there is no possibility of any value of b and c giving you, such a way that m can get cancelled out. There is no other term for m, so b has to be 0. There is no other term for time, so c also has to be 0, right? So then the only possibility where you can get a dimensionless number is L by d, right? Pi2 equal to L by d. So very easy. Now we go to the third pi term. Same thing, d power a, rho power b, v power c, epsilon power 1, right? So now this is exactly the same as the previous pi term. Previous pi term was L power 1. Here, instead of L, I have epsilon power 1. But epsilon and L both have the same dimension L, right? And again, rho has ml minus 3 and v has lt minus 1. So there's no possibility of finding any b or c such that, they can give you mass and length, so mass and time. So therefore b and c will have to be 0. So I'll just write go through the procedure, but I'm sure most of you can understand what's going on, right? So again, I get the same thing, pi3 equal to epsilon by d, right? Even this, you could have, even just by looking at it, you could have seen that this is the only possibility. The only possibility of getting a dimensionless term from here is epsilon by d, right? Okay. So now we come to the fourth pi term, d power a, rho power b, v power c, and the final non-repeating variable, which is mu power 1. Now again, when you just look at this, even without solving it, you should be able to see what the dimensionless term from rho, v, d, and mu can be. It's only one possibility, right? It's rho v d by mu, or of course, in this case, since you have given mu power 1, you will get A equal to -1, B equal to -1, C equal to -1. So let me just walk through the steps. So I'll expand these out into their corresponding dimensions, and then I'll write the equations for mass, length, and time. And then I'll solve these simultaneously and get the values for A, B, and C. It'll be -1, -1, -1. All three will be -1. So when I substitute these back, I'll get the fourth pi term as mu by rho Vd, right? Because it's a dimensionless number, even if you write it as rho Vd by mu, there's no harm done. Okay. So basically what it is telling you is that the fourth pi term or the fourth dimensionless variable is Reynolds number, or the inverse of Reynolds number. Okay, because it's dimensionless, it doesn't make a difference whether you write it like this or like that. Okay, so if you go back to the previous pi terms, let me just quickly go back to the previous pi term. If I had picked epsilon as the repeating variable, here I would have got d by epsilon instead of epsilon by d, right? You understand that? If instead of picking d as the repeating variable, I had picked epsilon as the repeating variable, I would have had epsilon power a, rho power b, v power c, and d power 1. Then I would have got d by epsilon instead of epsilon by d, right? Similarly, with the previous one, instead of getting L by d, if I had picked length as the repeating variable, if I had picked length as the repeating variable and diameter as a non-repeating variable, instead of getting L by d, I would have got d by L, which is the same thing, right? All right. Okay, so I've got these four dimensionless terms. Now I'm going to put them all together. So these are the four dimensionless variables that I've got. Pi 1 equal to delta p by rho v square. Pi 2 is L by d. Oh, sorry, this should be small L by d, not capital L by d. I'm sorry for that. Pi 2 is small L by d. So this small L is the length of the pipe. Pi 3 is epsilon by d, and pi 4 is mu by rho v d. You can write it as rho v d by mu also. No harm done, because it's anyway dimensionless. Okay. So my final function will look something like this. Pi 1 equal to function of pi 2, pi 3, pi 4. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. This should be pi 2, comma, pi 3, comma, pi 4. It is not the product of. Okay, let me correct it right now. It is not the product. Okay. Okay, it is not the product of pi 2, pi 3, pi 4. It is pi 2, comma, pi 3, comma, pi 4. All right. So that is the final pi term, which will look like this. So pi 1 is delta p by rho v square equal to function of L by d. Here I've written it correctly. It's not capital L by d. L by d, epsilon by d, and mu by rho v d. Okay. So now this, obviously you can clearly see that this is so similar to what we've already derived in class, right? So we've already learned that delta p by rho g, which is, what is this? Delta p by rho g is what? What is delta p by rho g?
Pressure head.
Not pressure head. P by rho g is pressure head. Delta p by rho g is head loss, HF. Right? Delta p by rho g is nothing but HF. Okay, let me maybe write that here. This term is just another way of writing H suffix F. Right? So head loss, you know this equation, HF equal to F into L by D by into V square by 2G. So see what this is telling us, right? So if you cancel out the G and bring the V square to this side, it will be delta P by rho V square equal to F. Of course, this F is friction factor. This F is the function. Okay, don't get confused with this F and this F. So this is friction factor, which depends on epsilon by D and rho Vd by mu, or mu by rho Vd, right? So you can clearly see how what we learned, this friction factor is simply a function of epsilon by D and mu by rho Vd, right? Your Moody's diagram, remember that, right? So this is proving to you what you already knew. Of course, the reason I chose this example is because you already know this. So it makes sense when I do dimensional analysis, you end up with the same thing that you already knew. And that is why, and that is precisely why I chose D as the repeating variable. If I had chosen L as the repeating variable, I would have got rho V L by mu. Okay. And I would have got epsilon by L. I would have got D by L, I would have got instead of L by D. That's okay. I would have got L by epsilon instead of epsilon by D. So the reason I chose D as a repeating variable was very deliberate. Instead of L or epsilon, I chose D as the repeating variables so that I would get terms that we are all already familiar with, right? I had a choice of choosing L, epsilon, or D. I chose D for this reason. Okay, that's because that when you solve more problems, you'll become familiar with, if I have two variables of the identical dimensions, which one to choose. That, you know, your experience, your analytical experience will help you in deciding which one to pick. Okay, so any questions on this? No questions?
Sir,
Yes.
uh,
Go ahead.
mu by rho means from that point how we got this function I didn't understand. Means like from 3 to 4 how we got
What do you mean 3 to 4? Which is 3?
from third bullet na. Like
Oh,
we wrote as a function of this 3 na.
yeah. No. This is the final answer. This third bullet is the final answer. This I'm just going back to what we have already learned. So the final answer is not this. This is the final answer. Okay, fair enough. Good question. Good that you asked that. Okay. The final answer is, this is the final answer. Okay. For the Buckingham pi theorem, this is the final answer. I'm trying to make sense out of what we have got here by telling you what we have already learned in theory. Okay, this final bullet point is not the answer. If this question is posed to you, you will write this final answer: delta p by rho v square equal to some function of L by D, epsilon by D, and mu by rho v D, and that will be your final answer. I'm not saying that this is because we already know it, and I'm showing you how dimension analysis is telling you something that you already know, right? But that is only in this case. Suppose you did not know about Moody's chart and you did not know about these things, you would have got this expression, and then you would have gone and done some experiments with different values of length and diameter and epsilon and D, right? You would have realized. So let us say that you are Moody and you get this expression. You are that Moody who is going to do all those experiments to get that Moody's chart. You will quickly realize that instead of taking 10 different pipes of 10 different diameters, okay, and checking 10 different lengths of that pipe, finding out what the pressure drop is, right? All you need to do is pick 10 different values of L by D. Understand what I'm saying? Instead of taking 10 diameters, 10 pipes of 10 different diameters and checking the pressure drop in all of them at different lengths, you will take maybe one pipe diameter and measure the pressure drop across different lengths. So that will give you different values of L by D. Similarly with epsilon by D, instead of running for 10 different materials with different values of epsilon and finding different diameters, all you have to do is maybe pick one material. Let us say you take PVC or you take concrete or whatever, some material which has some roughness, and just take 10 diameters of that, right? Or a simpler way of doing it, much simpler way of doing it is take 10 pipes of the same diameter, right? And people simulate roughness. You know what they do? They stick some sand inside the on the inner walls of the pipe. Okay, so for example, I can stick sand of 1 mm size inside the entire wall of that pipe. So that will create epsilon of 1 mm. Then I can take sand of 2 mm diameter and stick that inside the pipe. That will create sand of an epsilon of 2 mm. Or I can take maybe bigger pieces of stone of 5 mm diameter and stick them all inside the wall of the pipe and across the length of the pipe. You understand what I'm saying? So instead of going for 10 different pipes with 10 different materials, 10 different epsilon, you can just take 1 diameter pipe and recreate different kinds of roughness inside those pipes. And that will give you 10 different values of epsilon by D. Right? And of course, rho Vd by mu, you know what to do. You just vary the velocity and that will give you different values of rho Vd by mu. Instead of going for 10 different pipes, 10 different diameters, 10 different fluids with 10 different viscosities and densities, too difficult. Take the same fluid, Just vary the velocity. That will give you different value of Reynolds number. Okay. So imagine that you had this information before you did the experiments. Your experiments will be more careful, right? You will not just go and do all kinds of experiments, wasting time and money. Your experiment will be more targeted. You will say, you know what, I only want to know how L by D impacts my pressure drop. I will not try to find out what the impact of length is and impact of diameter is separately. You will only try to find the impact of L by D, right? Is that not a smarter way of doing it? That reduces the number of experiments by so much. Okay, any questions, comments?
Now we should, instead of doing 10 to the power 7 data, we should just take only 10 to the power 3 data. That's it.
Yeah, okay. 10 power 3 also sounds like a bad number of experiments, but that Moody's chart, I tell you, is done with extreme, so many data points to create that Moody's chart. Okay, so Moody's diagram is not a joke. Okay, it is the result of so many people's experiments, so many experiments. Okay, that's how they were able to come up with that Moody diagram. Okay, all right. Any other questions? In fact, if any of you have that Frank White's textbook, maybe I'll take a photo of there's a plot of Moody's diagram on that in the textbook, which shows you the number of data points that they have, hundreds of data points they have, and that is how they got these different curves for different values of epsilon by D. Okay, so it's a very painstaking experiment. Okay, anyway, so any other questions on this? Let's quickly go to the next example. Any questions? All right, so let me go to the next. Okay, so one more example. In laminar flow, the flow rate Q through a small tube is a function of the tube radius R, the fluid viscosity mu, and the pressure drop per unit length of the tube dP by dx. So this is very similar to what we have just discussed. Okay, so similar. Okay, and now the question is to find an appropriate dimensionless relationship. So instead of writing pressure drop, instead of saying delta P is a function of L, here I've taken dP by dx, which is pressure drop per unit length, and I'm equating it to the flow rate Q, right? So it's very similar to the previous one, but it gives a different flavor. Okay, so we first of all convert this into a mathematical statement: Q equal to function of R mu dP by dx. Count the number of variables: 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Q R mu dP by dx. Then write the dimensions for each of those: L cube T minus 1, L ml minus 1 T minus 1, and so on, ml minus 2 T minus 2. Then count J, the number of dimensions, 3, right? M, L, and T. Then you identify the repeating variables. Now here, yes, anybody?
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, how okay, after first of all knowing like Q is as a function of R mu and dP by dx, how come we will know first this equation first of all?
That's a good question. That's a good question. So now let us say I ask you a question, right? I give you a stone. Okay, I give you a stone which is flat. I give you another stone which is spherical. Okay, I ask you to throw, and both these stones have the same weight. I ask you to throw both these stones. Okay, and I ask you which stone will fly far away, more distance. You are assuming that you are throwing it, both of them, with the exact same speed, same angle, everything. You understand the question? One stone is flat. Okay, I mean, I'm sure all of you have played with that stone. If you throw the stone at the water surface, it'll bounce on that water multiple times. You've all played with this, I'm sure.
Flat one will go long.
So the flat one will go long. How did you know that?
Only if we make a correct.
Yeah, if you throw it such that the flat surface is parallel to the direction in which you are throwing it.
Yeah.
Okay, unfortunately, I would love to do this, in front of you guys, so you all know what I'm talking about.
What is this question? Can you repeat, sir?
Yeah, his question was, how did you know this equation in the first place? That Q is a function of R mu and dP by dx. How do you know that in the first place? Only if you know this, you can do the remaining part of the um, uh, problem, right? The
Yes,
remainder of the problem is
yes.
possible only if you,
Right.
you know this first equation. So that's why I'm asking you. I'm asking you a different question. I'm saying, suppose I give you two stones. I ask you to do an experiment to find out which stone can fly farther distance. Okay, and I tell you that this is the kind of stones I'll give you. I'll give you heavier stones. I'll give you lighter stones. I'll give you flatter stones. I'll give you rounder stones. Okay, all of these are going to have a role in how far it will fly away, right? So that length will be a function of whether it is flat or not, which means the right. So let us say we call it the thickness of the
Area
stone.
of con.
Area, right? See, you're
Area
coming
of
up with
con.
all kinds of variables, right?
Uh,
Okay, now let us say you're throwing this stone at the top of Mount Everest, or you're throwing it at mean sea level. Do you think there'll be any difference? Same stone, same weight, everything same.
there will be, yes.
What is the difference?
Actually, the density of water differs.
No, density of air.
So it
Density of air.
means we are throwing on water also.
No.
External,
I'm not asking that
external
question,
factor on it.
right? So you'll realize that the distance that this stone flies depends on how heavy that stone is. So that will be a function. Depends on the dimensions of the stone. If it's a circular stone, it may fly a certain distance. If it is a flat stone and you throw it at the right angle, then it will fly a farther distance, right? If the air is less dense, it will fly farther. If the air is more dense, it will fly less.
So there are infinitely many variables.
No, not infinite. No, don't say infinite. Do not say infinite. The distance of the moon from the earth does not impact this, correct? Whether you do it during sunlight or when it is after sunset, it doesn't matter, right?
It
Don't
may
say
matter.
infinite parameters.
It may matter, sir. But,
Nah, so okay, so then you will convert that into a parameter. You will say temperature.
yeah.
Okay, because temperature determines pressure. All I'm trying to say is it does not actually depend on infinite parameters. It may depend on 10 parameters, let us say. Okay, but you will write all of those. Now, the interesting thing is, this will even tell you, this dimensional analysis will even tell you, let us say you list something that is not a, that doesn't depend on this. Interestingly, dimensional analysis will even tell you that you know what, looks like this doesn't depend on, whatever you are looking at. Let us say all the different terms in your, let us think of the same example, right? Pressure is not dependent on temperature. Let us say you write distance equal to function of weight of the stone, characteristic length of that stone, right? Diameter, length, thickness, whatever it is, the density of air, etc., and then you write one equation. You write temperature. Now, none of these terms is dependent on temperature. The distance that it travels doesn't have temperature in it. The weight of the body doesn't have temperature in it. The density of air doesn't have temperature in it. The weight of the what else? The dimension of the stone does not depend on temperature, and so on, right? So you'll get a pi term in which temperature will be to the power 0, which means it doesn't depend on temperature. All right. So okay, that's what I'm trying to say. All I'm trying to say is this. If you don't know all the parameters that it depends on, let us say instead of writing these R, mu, and dP by dx, you also write some more terms that are not relevant. Dimensional analysis will eliminate it for you very nicely. And then you know that when you run the experiments, you don't have to include all these other terms that you thought were important, or you are not sure whether it was important or not. Dimensional analysis will also remove those terms for you and make it simpler for you. All right. Okay,
Yes,
so let us keep going because I don't want to go over time. So anyway, so the procedure is fairly straightforward. Okay, so in this case, you have 3 dimensions. So you have to pick 3 repeating variables out of the 4 variables. Rule number 1, what was rule number 1? You can't pick the original variable itself, Q. So how many variables are left? R, mu, and dP by dx. So therefore you have to pick all the 3. That's it. So because rule number 1 is the most important one. Once the, that is satisfied, then if other rules don't even apply, right? Because it covers all M, L, and T. Whatever variables are available, you have picked them. So there's no question of picking a simpler variable and so on, right? So you have picked these three variables. Then the number of dimensionless variables, which means the number of pi terms, is k, which is n minus j, which is equal to 1. So you will only have one pi term. So let us build the pi term quickly. So pi term will be pi 1 equal to r power a, which is our repeating variable number 1, mu power b, repeating variable, dp by dx power c, third repeating variable, times q, which is the non-repeating variable, power 1. So I'll expand this out and equate it to m power 0, l power 0, t power 0. And then I'll separate out the mass, length, and time and write out the expressions for a, b, c, right? I get three equations, three unknowns. You solve for it. I get a equal to -4, b equal to 1, c equal to -1. I substitute those back. I get pi 1 equal to q into mu power 1. That's what b is, times r power divided by r power 4, because a is -4, times dp by dx in the denominator, right? Now the interesting thing is, if there's only one pi term, then pi that must be equal to some constant, right? If this is dimensionless, it should be equal to some constant, right? It can't take multiple values, right? This entire thing must be a constant. So now this is also very interesting. This also you have learned in your theory in our laminar. Okay, so this is the final answer. Pi 1 equal to q mu by r power 4 dp by dx is a constant, is the final answer. Okay, I'm just going back to what we learned in theory. So if you go back to your notes, you will see this. You will see this equation somewhere along when we were deriving this. You would have seen q equal to minus pi by 8 r power 4 by mu dp by dx. We extended this, and this is how we. I don't know if you remember this. Let's see. Let me. Do you remember this? Q equal to, what is it? 128. Oh, sorry, not 128. I'll write it in terms of HF. Oh God. Right? HF equal to 128 mu L Q by, what was it? Does anybody remember?
Pi d power 4 by rho g.
Pi d power 4 rho g, right? Pi d power 4 times rho g. Remember, we derived this in class. So if you go into your notes and go a few steps before this, you will find this. Okay. Then I write dp by dx as delta p by L. Okay. And then I rearrange terms and do a little bit of magic and I get this. Okay. And that is how after this we get F equal to 64 by RE. So please go back to your notes and check your 64 by RE. We derived this in class. Okay. So when we derived this in class, a few steps before this, we would have got this step. Okay. So please go back and check that. So that is exactly identical to what you see over here, right? Q mu by r power 4 dp by dx is a constant. So that is what we also obtained from our theory. All right. So any questions? All right. So let us very quickly just finish this off and go on. Okay. So then now we are going to talk about similitude or similarity. As I said, so far we have spoken about identifying pi terms and so on. Right? Once you identify the pi terms, you have to go to the lab and run the experiments, right? And vary the different values of L by D or epsilon by D or whatever it is, depending on what your pi terms are. Now you are at a position where you can go and run the experiments in the lab, right? But when you do the experiments in the lab, typically you are trying to do it for something that you want to implement in reality. So as I said, the aeroplane that is flying in the air. Now, when you recreate that aeroplane inside the lab, right? The real aeroplane, is obviously much bigger. You're not going to create a life-size aeroplane inside the lab. You'll create a much smaller aeroplane inside the lab, which must be similar to what the actual aeroplane is going to be. Okay, so when I say similar, there is a particular connotation that I have for similar, right? So a model scale aeroplane, typically you will test that one in the lab before you build a full size prototype, right? A prototype is basically a working version of the aeroplane, right? So when I build that model scale aeroplane, I have to ensure that the model and the prototype are similar. Okay, so when I say similar, I have a very particular idea of similarity in my mind. Okay, I mean that these two, the model and the prototype, must be geometrically similar, right? So if the model is 100 feet long and 20 feet wide or 30 feet wide, then the prototype, if it is 100 feet long and 30 feet wide, then the model must also have the same ratio, 100:30. It should have the same 100:30 inside the lab also. You can't change the length scales and so on, right? Similarly, the angles, whatever angles that are there in the original prototype that you intend to build, the model must also have the same angles. So the geometry of the model and the prototype must be exactly same. So that is called geometric similarity. Okay, this is a necessary condition. You require this. Okay, so that's one level of similarity that you must have. The next kind of similarity that you need to have is called kinematic similarity, right? So not only should the length scales be same, even the time scales should be same, right? Which means the same, instead of having only length scale being similar, time scale should also be similar. In other words, if length and time are in the appropriately scaled, then the velocity scale must also be the same, right? Because these two together means the same thing. If length and time are scaled appropriately, then velocity also will appropriately be scaled, right? So if the real aeroplane is experiencing 1000 kilometers per hour of wind, then the model aeroplane must experience something that is scaled down to its actual size, right? So the model may be 100 times smaller than the real one. So the velocity also, we have to find out what scale you must apply. If it is 1000 kilometers per hour, maybe you have to apply 20 kilometers per hour for it to be exactly identical to the real prototype. Okay, so this is the second kind of similarity. The third kind of similarity that we expect is the dynamic similarity, right? So it should have the same length scale, it should have the same time scale, and also the same force or mass scale ratios, right? So if the real aeroplane is weighing 5 tons, right, and it is 100 meters long and 20 meters wide or whatever it is, then when you make the smaller one in the lab, it should also have proportionately, the weights, the forces or the mass should also be scaled appropriately. Okay, only when you have all of these all of these conditions are satisfied, that the model that you build in the lab is geometrically similar, is kinematically similar, and dynamically similar, then whatever results you get for the model can be exactly extended to the results that you will get in the real prototype. Does that make sense? Right? You build a model that is exactly similar both in terms of geometry and in terms of the kinematics and the dynamics, then you get, that whatever results you get in the lab will be exactly equivalent to what you will get in the real field. Okay, but now this is a problem. Okay, this is not always very easy to do. The geometric similarity, as I said, is necessary. Without geometric similarity, nothing else matters, right? So if your plane is 100 feet long and 20 feet wide, and when you make it in the lab, you don't have the same ratio, then no matter what else is pakka, as long as geometric similarity is not there, nothing else matters, right? So this is most important condition, necessary condition, right? Then you also have kinematic similarity. This is also, it's possible to achieve most of the times, but dynamic similarity is very, very difficult to achieve in the lab, right? Because to do it exactly in such a way that all of these conditions are satisfied is not always possible. Okay, so what typically it's done is, let us say you're not able to achieve the same Reynolds number that you will encounter in the real field scenario, then you'll accomplish whatever Reynolds number you can in the lab, and then you'll have to extrapolate to the actual Reynolds number that it will experience in the in the real situation. Okay, obviously when you extrapolate and all, there's uncertainty, but there's no way to get around that. Yes, somebody has a question.
Sir, making a prototype is costly, na, sir?
Yes.
So doesn't it mean like they are wasting money?
No, you don't build the prototype. You make the model first, which is inside the lab, right? So model scale means lab scale. So you build something at a small scale, test it in the lab thoroughly, and once you're convinced that this
So what is
model,
the difference between prototype and model?
prototype is a working version that is out in the field, right? And it's a full size. So let us say you're going to build a passenger aircraft which is whatever is going to seat 300 people or 400 people, right? That is the prototype. It will be exactly the same as the final version that you'll actually sit and fly, right? The model is something that is much smaller that you can test inside the lab.
So preparing model is also money waste, na, sir? Means like twice.
If you don't do that, then how will you do the prototype? It's much more. See, a full size aeroplane will cost millions of dollars. Okay, and there has to be one person sitting inside it to fly it. Whereas if I have a small aeroplane of 10 centimeters by 2 centimeters or whatever it is, that you can control inside the lab, you just simulate as if it's flying and so on, right? So that's obviously it'll cost money, but it's much less expensive than doing the real thing.
So actually means like the next slide you will show some dam prototype, na?
Yes.
The dam
Model.
that requires again work, labor, time and money, na?
Somebody has to get paid, na? Somebody has to do some work, otherwise
Means they are building 2 dams.
No, that's not
instead
a
of
real
building.
dam. That's a much smaller size. Okay, so I'll go to the next slide. So this is a prototype, a model of a real dam, right? So you think this takes the same amount and resources as building a real dam? You know how long Polavaram Dam has been in construction, under construction?
So how long this does take time, sir? It looks perfect, na? That's why I'm telling.
Yeah, this will probably take a couple of months. That will take years and years to complete. Polavaram Dam is still not complete. When was it started? Right. So this will take maybe a couple of months. Maybe it will take 6 months. I don't know. Depends on how accurate you want to go and how pakka you want to do it and all that, right? So if you see next year, most likely when you guys go for the field visit to Polavaram Dam, you will see the Polavaram Dam model. It's not it's okay. That one is it's not like it will fit on top of a table. It's a big room. That entire room is just that model. I think that room was probably 50-60 feet long by 50-60 feet wide. That size of a room, and the entire room was filled with just that Polavaram model. Okay, so that's how big that model was. Okay, and I think sometimes it may not even be, some models may be only for demonstration purposes. This model, for example, the one that you're seeing on the screen, is something that you can actually run an experiment on. You change the water level and then you can measure some force or whatever it is, right? So that Polavaram Dam model that you will see there is not an experimental dam. It is more for illustrating how big that, because when you go and see the dam, you can only see one part of the dam. Only when you see the model, you see the entire dam in its entirety, right? Otherwise, you can't even visualize how the different components of the dam will look and all that. Okay, so some of them may be for visualization purposes. Some of it may be for experiments. You can run an experiment on a model. Okay, obviously it's expensive, but the costs are much lesser than what you would encounter in the real scale. I mean, this will be crores and crores of rupees. That will be, I don't know, a few lakhs maybe, right? All right. So yeah, so I don't know what's the time. Oh, we've gone past time. I'm sorry. All right. So as usual, if you have questions, please send them to me. So with this, this is the most we're going to talk about dimensional analysis. I'll send out a problem set today, and then next week when we meet, we are going to talk about open channel flows. All right. Thank you very much. Sorry for going over time. All right. Thank you. Bye bye.